And coming back on the show, Steve Skroce. He's here to talk about the first volume of Maestros, out in comic book stores everywhere and on Comixology on Halloween. If you're looking for some magically tinged, extra-dimensional, I guess not Yuletide, but whatever the adjective for Halloween is, fun. Steve, thanks again for coming on the show.
I think the word is Halloween tide.
Halloween Tide. Let's go for it. Halloween Tide it is.
I'm pretty sure about that.
So, Steve, the last time you were on, I don't actually think I asked the big question. Where did the idea for Maestros come from?
Oh, geez, that's a toughie. It was kind of like it evolved over a long period of time. Like at some point, it was more about just this kind of character who challenged the tropes of a lot of the fantasy stuff I was reading at the time, who maybe was good-hearted, but potentially could be pushed in certain directions. In a way, he was kind of like he was a bit of a scoundrel, and he would be someone who was from our world who would be familiar with the fantasy tropes of fiction and be calling those out. Was kind of the idea for where Willie comes from. And it was kind of a sword and horse thing for a while, and then for a while it was like it was a much more traditional Dark Lord, and then I kind of stumbled on the idea that he would inherit this wizarding, what's the word, kind of a
kingdom or realm.
Yeah, kingdom or realm, or what do they call it, like a family, can't think of the word.
Dynasty?
Dynasty, right, so for a period there, it was going to be this big funeral that he goes to, and he kind of, because there was all these crazy characters, and he had this buddy, and they were going to go to this this funeral, and there'd be all these wild characters and that he would interact with, and then at the funeral, when they were reading out the will, you would find out it all goes to him, and then I just, once you start putting those ideas into the container of a 22-page comic book, you just start cutting things, and you just start getting to the point. And I think that just kind of helped me carve away the fat, and I kind of just decided I wanted a fast-moving story that had a lot of action, had as much character in it, some comedy, some horror, and so on.
And to that point, you really do hit the ground running with this series. I mean, it starts out with an entire family getting massacred, but having said that, it never loses its sense of fun. Even in that same issue, there's, without necessarily going into specifics, but there is a you see a lot of somebody's
oh yeah,
yeah, a lot of dick. I'll just say it. Yeah, there's penis in that first issue, but it's so comedically done. It draws the reader in, despite the stakes that you've set. It's this book has always kind of surprised me in how fun it is, because even though you start out with a magical genocide, there is still laughs to be had. Was that always kind of the trick, balancing the tone with the scale?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely like that. You've got the stakes couldn't be higher. It's the universe. It's zombie wizards, and the fate of reality is at stake, and this guy is just kind of profiting off magic in the basest way possible, and I really was inspired by, but I kind of feel like if there was magic, that'd be one of the first things that they would, you would do, they would use it for all sorts of mundane crap like that, and the Weasley brothers in Harry Potter have their little shop, and it's supposed to be for kids, and I just remember, you're sitting around with your friends with beers, and you're thinking, and a dirty joke comes up with what would the adult version of that Weasley shop be? And it would be some sort of male enhancement.
Yeah.
And so then I stumbled on that idea. For a while there, I was it was in, it was out, and I thought maybe it'd be too much. And then it's Image, and you can do anything there. And Brian Vaughn is showing, and Fiona Staples are showing, Male Wang, every other issue, every other page.
Mm-hmm. That's why it sells so well.
That's what I was hoping I could piggyback on some of that.
Yeah.
Just But
I don't know if you would necessarily say riding on the coattails.
yeah, but I don't know. I thought it was funny, and it sort of made sense. He's not supposed to be doing magic, so he's kind of just. They get to throw the Saudi royal family and the Koch brothers under the bus at the same time with that scene.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I do like how there are topical moments certainly with Maestros, but even with the one thing that never changes, or at least changes perhaps the least, is the POV character, is Willie. Because even though he inherits this position of power, you still put him through the ringer. You still put him through his paces, and he's still... I mean, there is definitely some character growth, but that foundation of him kind of being a magical con man is always there.
Well, he doesn't I've heard some people were kind of, and I knew it was a bit of a risk with the ending because he, generally in these stories, like the character arc or the more like the character bump is they learn something, and that is self-actualizes them, or they learn from their mistake in a way, and almost the opposite happens in Maestros, and he kind of, but I feel like that was the more honest thing to do. You don't give that guy a bunch of power and then suddenly he becomes awesome. You know what I mean? He still has more to lose and more to experience before, he really, can see the folly of having ultimate power.
Right, he's a character that I feel like always has to learn things the hard way, and so even when the stakes change, he's still kind of stumbling through in that regard.
Yeah, basically the two, the women in his life, his girlfriend and his mother are sort of his guiding lights, and he's willing to make the wrong choice a little too often.
Right. Now, moving over to the kind of the more visual side, obviously you draw this as well, and it's got... would it be safe to say that, Maestros is the most psychedelic imagery you've ever rendered visually?
Ooh, psychedelic. I guess so. Well, I've drawn a lot of stuff for movies, but definitely Maestros is kind of, a lot of what I like about fantasy. I like a lot of... There's this guy, China Mieville, writes really weird fantasy books, and there's another fantasy writer from the olden days, Jack Vance, and a lot of the wizards and maestros are kind of inspired by his stories, which are also very weird. So yeah, I kind of like that a little bit about them, that they would be, they're not Tolkien-esque, which you see a lot in fantasy,
Right.
They're a little weirder. I do have an elf character that you find that's kind of reacting to Tolkien, who's kind of a racist, white supremacist elf. But that's kind of, if you've ever actually gone online, there's been all these debates between about people looking back on Tolkien and seeing a lot of racism in it, and even in the movie, and I can't remember if it's in the book where they go, the elves, the purest race of I forget what the line is, but basically it basically just calls them the most honorable race, and men are weak, and you just change some names around, and suddenly that becomes pretty effed up,
Yeah, you got the lazy fat hobbits and the dwarves that are always kind of presented as super greedy, and it's like, oh, these hopefully aren't analogs to something else.
Yeah, they are, and then the orcs are just ravening monsters, So I tried in Maestros to have, when you meet the demon in the Maestros, there's the demon king, he looks like the darkness from Legend, but not really. I mean, there's good and bad in him as well, They're sitting there at dinner eating these things called mansies that look like little miniature men that are more like, that look like little people. But to him, he has a line where he says, well, they have no more consciousness than the cow or dog on your world. And it's like, maybe we're not, we just have all agreed that it's okay to eat animals, but maybe it's wrong,
Never actually like paused to think of like the moral efficacy because it's just become the norm.
Right, stuff like that. We unsee stuff like that all the time, right? Like there's, we just choose not to acknowledge these things, and there's all kinds of suffering conjoined to our prosperity,
Well, and you had mentioned legend earlier, and I feel like you had mentioned your background working in film as well, and you're quite prolific. But I feel like a lot of Maestros is kind of drawn from like 70s and 80s like sci-fi fantasy, without necessarily being beholden to them. Like, some of those sets or some of those environments are kind of like Flash Gordon-esque and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, totally. That Flash Gordon movie. Yeah, it's definitely things that... Like, that's not a great movie, but I saw it at a certain age, and I just have a soft spot for it. And, I really liked it. And I've watched it since then, and I still kind of like it, even though it's pretty bad in a lot of ways.
I feel that way about Tron.
Yeah, there's a good example, totally.
Yeah, like I love Tron. I've tried to introduce girlfriends to Tron. Those relationships don't usually last, but
you be there for it. You've got to like it. You met it when you were a kid, so it resonates with you. And if you weren't there at that time, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, they don't have that same frame of reference, that same like nostalgia. But yeah, so a lot of to kind of take it back to Maestros, a lot of that was kind of that childhood foundation, that sci-fi fantasy foundation was a lot of inspiration visually.
Oh, definitely. Like, I use a lot of gore, like, the Evil Dead movies, the Fright Night from the 80s, the Dead Alive, which is one of Peter Jackson's first movies, has all this gross, horror comedy in it, and you get a lot of that on Maestros too, where those two things are right on top of each other.
I do have to ask as a bit of a tangent. Well, for an even cooler tangent, or something like out of the blue, I don't know what did it. Before we even like booked this interview, I was reading X-Man #1, which you did in the 90s.
Oh yeah, cool.
I was just kind of like flipping through, and I was like, "Oh shit, Steve did this!" Like,
There's some bad drawings in there, man. Well, yeah, that kind of was ripping off like whatever was popular at the time, and yeah, it's all over. Everyone's kind of going grr, everyone's gritting their teeth, and everyone's overly muscled, and I used to hate that stuff, and now I kind of look back at that time with a lot of, nostalgia.
It was very much a product of its time. Everybody's got lots of pouches, guns that are bigger than they are. Yeah,
he's got there's no, like, what was my thinking with his costume? He's wearing kind of a corset. I think I was trying to rip off the Dune. If you remember that David Lynch Dune.
Oh yeah.
He's wearing a still suit that's like unzipped, and I've just turned it into like a jacket. But it's got kind of like, I always love that design, and so I just threw him in that. Really, not even giving much thought why he would be wearing something that way. He's running around the wasteland. But
fashion over function.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at like the dude like in Mad Max, that the first one before it takes place before the apocalypse, and they're just randomly wearing like nothing but leather, like a Judas Priest music video, and it's just like, okay, no, I totally get it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Why would it be in the desert? I mean, there's no water in the desert.
Yeah. But the other tangent I had, since you had mentioned Evil Dead, and I know you're big on the cinema, I was wondering if you had the chance to watch the new Halloween yet.
Oh, I haven't. I would like to go see that. I got 2 kids under 2, and I hardly get to see anything. I did see this thing called Mandy.
Oh, with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, no, Nicolas Cage. It's kind of a crazy movie. It's another one of these things where, like, it's got a lot of style. I don't know about the story, but I don't have a ton of money, but there are some cool things in it, and he gives it his all, and yeah, that was sort of my Halloween movie that I've seen in the last month, so it's definitely not for everybody, but it's kind of cool. I don't know, I was entertained by it.
It's the most Nicolas Cage performance. He just goes for broke.
Yeah, he goes. They have an amazing scene where after they killed his girlfriend, he recovers and gets his stash of vodka and pounds it, and then he just works himself up until by the end of the movie, he's basically a slasher character, just killing these cult members.
Yeah. So you were mentioning, with Maestros, balancing the gore, balancing the humor, balancing the just the scale and the scope and everything. Was this kind of a book where you wanted to take not just one genre, not be beholden to one genre, and just kind of blend all the things you loved about comics and to kind of distill it into one arc?
Yeah, as much as I could. I mean, I wanted to have characters and a theme and have it be about something, and hopefully have it be, an entertaining journey. But yeah, all my influences are all in there constantly. But that's going to be true of anything I do, I think. Moving forward. But yeah, there's more to add. There's going to be more Maestros. Right now I'm working on something else, but when I get back to Maestros, I'm going to explore him. In the Maestros universe, Earth is this magicless place that was sort of, magic is, ubiquitous throughout reality, and every world has it, and on Earth was created as a place without it to sort of, they left it in the ground to see what would happen. We became like this weird anomaly among all these magical realms, and that we have developed our great technology and things like that, and we have our ingenuity instead of magical powers, and so Will is. But because of that, the world's a little screwed up. So I think in the second story, he's going to return to Earth with his magic and basically announce who he is, and take over and solve all the problems. But then that will lead to new ones.
Will the second arc see more kind of jumping around in terms of chronologically? Or has because his origin's pretty well laid out at this point.
Well, yeah, his origin is, but there's anything can happen. The spell, the Book of Remaking, can still be used, and I don't want to spoil too much of it, but a villain from the first arc will return, and he's not finished with Will or the Book of Remaking, and yeah, it should be fun. It's still in the cooker. Still in the cooker. So.
Oh yeah, I was about to say the second arc hadn't been solicited yet. If you had to put a ballpark on it, and of course, this is non-binding by any stretch of the imagination. But when can we expect to see more Maestros?
Well, probably 2020. I mean, I'm working on a post-apocalyptic sci-fi story right now that I'm going to do before then, just to kind of
change the gears. Yeah.
I have kind of a few stories that were kind of further along, so rather than grinding right into the next Maestros, I thought I would switch gears, do something else, and then that gives me more time to sort of meditate on what Maestros will be, and I can draw a bunch of different stuff, and then I'll come back with Maestros.
I feel like you had kind of jumped straight into Maestros from We Stand on Guard, which is a much different book, right?
Yes, oh definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty straight military sci-fi story, and my new thing that I'm working on is a little, it's obviously closer to Stand on Guard than Maestros is, but it's got a bit of comedy, it's got kind of my personality, so.
Are you both writing and drawing that one as well?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Going for the singularity of vision, singularity of artistic vision.
Right.
But do you always kind of have to mix things up to keep it interesting for you, to keep you coming back for more?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we could have done more Maestros, but I just kind of felt like I had this other thing I wanted to do, and I thought I would just try and pivot into that. I don't know if it's maybe it was wiser to do. I'm not sure from a business standpoint, what was smarter, but I kind of Images, been very supportive, and they're letting me do it, so I'm going to do this one, and then go back to Maestros. There's a few different types of stories I want to tell, and hopefully I could do that at Image.
Yeah.
For a couple years.
And I mean, that way, one, you kind of rebuild the anticipation instead of working the grind, like you were saying, and two, I mean, you could take a page from Marvel, just make it a new #1. Just give it a new subtitle,
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, That was my other thinking. It might be better to, like, the Maestros trade will be out for a while. Hopefully, the people who read, hopefully by the time we come around to the volume 2 of Maestros, there will be, it'll have gathered a little momentum and a few more readers around along the way. Hopefully, I think it'll be good. We'll see.
Now that you've got an arc under your belt, what would you say is the thing that has kind of surprised you the most about the story, either in terms of reader response or in terms of your own storytelling as you kind of found the story moving forward?
What surprised me the most? I'm not sure about what surprised me the most. I mean, it's very gratifying to come up with your own stuff and to create it, but it's also a lot of work. So, it's you got to really want to do it. I guess it's just like I don't know if it's surprising, but I've really been gratified being able to get the opportunity to do my own thing. I mean, it was great working with Brian, and I'd love to work with another writer I love like him or someone else one day, but it's also pretty cool to just cook up your own thing and be able to, get some traction with that and interest, and it gives you more confidence to go on and do your other things. Because when I'm sitting there, drawing this guy drinking a potion and getting a huge erection, I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to really land. You're like, maybe this isn't a good idea. You don't see that a lot in Venom or something.
That's what that movie needed, really. It wasn't the Eminem song. It needed some. I needed some Eddie Brock penis.
Did you see that? Did you see Venom?
I did. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I didn't hate it, but it was like, it's like one of these movies. It's like kind of, maybe it's a good bad movie. It's got such a weird tone. Like at the end, she's just like sitting there on her steps and they're drinking coffees, and she's like, "Oh, gee, I'm really sorry about Venom. Like he just lost his, like I don't know,
dog or something,
like his like pickleball partner or something, and it's like this weird entity that was possessing him, and like, we would have invited him over for dinner, but I don't know, it was kind of a nuts movie. It needed to be more nuts.
It did. We were talking Mandy earlier. It needed, but for me, the kicker was at the end of the movie when you find out he still has the symbiote. Spoilers for Venom for anyone that cares. But when he eats the dude in the convenience store, and the convenience store lady is just like, "Oh, okay, like." That's weird. Like, she's completely unfazed that a human just got consumed in his entirety right in front of her.
Yeah, totally. I know what you mean. That's the kind of thing you're just like, no one's really paying attention. Like, that script. It's like, no one says, hey, this is messed up that this character has no reaction to this totally bizarre thing. Yeah, the reality of it is just like, out the window. That's the worst thing about it.
Yeah. Or maybe the best. Who knows? Like, maybe that's what redeems it.
Yeah, I mean, an R-rated version probably would have been pretty good. I mean, because it kind of felt like Venom wasn't really that mean, No. He didn't do that much.
Yeah, he's really just kind of like the devil on your shoulder given form.
And so you cut your head off, and then what happens? Because the bodies, you don't see the bodies or anything. I don't know.
No, they can't. They can't do the blood. But maybe we're gonna get like Carnage apparently with a sequel. That's inevitably gonna happen. I would.
That wig.
Oh, the Ronald McDonald wig. Oh my God, I would.
Look, it was such a crazy choice to put him in that wig. I guess the comic character has a hair like that, but I don't know.
Yeah, but like also the comic character doesn't like. Eddie Brock is like a tall, jacked blonde man, and not Tom Hardy.
Well, he's pretty jacked. He was Bane.
He was Bane. And I love really Warrior.
I really want to just see Tom Hardy play Bane for the rest of his career. Just one movie after another, different adventures with Bane and that voice,
Yeah, with the voice.
Bane's Sandwich Shop, or Okay, maybe I don't want to digress too much.
Yeah, give me the crying game, but give me it with Bane. That's what would have saved Star Trek Nemesis, really, if Tom Hardy was Bane.
I'd say anything.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what the worst Tom Hardy movie is. And it might be Nemesis for all I know. It might be Venom.
Well, yeah, it's got to be Venom.
Yeah, that's the well, okay, since we're on this I was going to, Steve, our typical question is what are you geeking out over, and we're already in this pipeline. So what
am I geeking over? Let's see here. I have been watching I rewatched Logan a couple weeks ago. And that's kind of my favorite superhero anything, I think. That's the best. What did I see lately? Saw Solo, rented Solo the other night. I fell asleep at the end. Such a weird movie. It's always, they just like... Did you see that one, Solo?
I see them all, man. Yeah. As
much as I can. I sneak out when the kids go to sleep. That was a weird movie. They're just constantly explaining the origin of all of his, like, personal effects. It's weird.
It all apparently comes from 1 2-hour adventure. What a coincidence.
Like the part that even, like, the Millennium Falcon is like his father worked at the factory where they used to make those, so like somehow the Millennium Falcon is like his father.
Yeah.
Because we're just like, really? That's like too much.
Yeah, yeah. Or when he gets his name in the beginning of the movie, he's like, "I'm all alone," and then
that's like such a mistake. So even Solo doesn't sound like a weird name in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, yeah.
What's his real name then? Like Han Schwartz?
Yeah. I don't think that Luke Skywalker literally walks on clouds. I don't think that's
Or like some he was waiting in line to get the power converters, and like the guy called him Skywalker, and it stayed with him.
Yeah, forever.
But there were things that I liked too. Like there was some good adventure, and I don't know. Just I think those Lord and Miller would have made a really cool movie, and then they were too,
I think they adhered a little too much to the Lucasfilm, the new generation of Star Wars formula. That's where they were like, we don't want improv Star Wars. And it's like, well, but you want it needs to be its own flavor. I thought. I still think it was a fun movie, but it definitely has its flaws.
It did. It annoyed me. Like where just bothered me. All this weird stuff about it. The guy names him Solo, and I don't know. We got his gun from this guy, and the Millennium Falcon's his dad, and
there's Chewbacca. Again, all within like 2 hours, he's got everything, and it's like, oh,
he speaks Wookiee, but only that one time.
Yeah, he never has to again. Yeah, it's the weirdest. Now that I'm like saying this out loud, I'm like, it's the weirdest movie.
Then it was like that they tried to address the civil like the there's a good example of like the unseen racism, like where they decide like all the robots are basically a slave race, and so they have the one kind of politically minded robot,
and then they kill her off like immediately. It's like, and let's not just kill her. Let's make her the navigational computer for the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, that really pays off in the later films,
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's why they use female pronouns whenever they're talking about the ship, and it's like I thought everybody used female pronouns when they talked about their ship. I thought that was the trope.
Who's even an even bigger slave now that she's just this disembodied entity with no agency whatsoever. Just
God,
hard drive of this ship. Anyway,
what a weird movie.
It's got all kinds of weird stuff in there.
I do have to recommend because I'm a big no movie messed me up more as a kid than the first Halloween. And I have to say, watching...
Yeah, how was the sequel?
It's like, I don't know how beholden you are to 2 through 10 or whatever, but because it ignores all the sequels. But
I think that's smart.
Yeah, because I never liked the idea that Laurie and Michael Myers were related, right? Because then it's like, well, I'm not related to him, so I guess I'm good. Yeah, it makes him a completely random killer again. It's not necessarily a scary movie, but it's an intense movie. Like, there's a lot of, like, he's there, or you can see him coming, but the characters on screen can't. That's where the tension really comes from in the new Halloween.
It's always his POV, and he's up there floating around.
Yeah, and in the 1978 original, there would be shots where you would totally see him like looking at people through windows, and they wouldn't see him. And it's like, so you always knew he was there, but they never did. And I think the new one, kind of gets back to that a bit.
Yeah, that's cool, and I guess she makes him pay.
Oh, she beats the hell out of him. Yeah,
She's got Sarah Connor.
Yeah, very Sarah Connor, very Ellen Ripley, very kind of like, in that mold.
I love it. Yeah, I'll go see it as soon as I get a chance. That's a good one to go see, actually.
So, Steve, before I return you to the wilds of the West Coast, what can we? I mean, you had kind of hinted at a bit of it, and without giving the game away, what can we expect for your next project? And I mean, you had mentioned Maestros tentatively 2020, if not late 2019. When can we expect the other book or at least more details on the book you got percolating right now?
I don't know when we'll announce, but it's a post-apocalyptic adventure in the future. Basically, everyone's been wiped out, and it's kind of a futuristic America that's just kind of forgotten itself. And the story is sort of, the engine in it is kind of there's this idea, there's this super bunker that was built. It's basically a hollowed-out mountain that was built to, rebuild the world and America if there had ever an apocalypse occurred, right? And so it was built for the heads of state and the best and brightest, but they never really made it. It was just like a handful of the one percenters kind of got there, and they didn't really do anything. And now it's like a few generations later, and one of them has kind of, kid who grew up there has kind of decided to, set out and reclaim America. Only he's kind of got this, he's named himself the new president. He hasn't been elected, and he's just kind of this, psycho who's going to use this facility's resources to basically create this weird, twisted version of America that he kind of remembers that never really existed,
Well, I was going to say, between this character that you're describing and Willie, though I'm seeing some similarities, these kind of like young male protagonists with a bit of a chip on their shoulder.
Well, the main protagonist is actually this girl. There's two, like within this giant base, there's like a couple different classes. There's like the maintenance class, the working class, and then there's the heads of state, the families of the heads of state who it was built for. And at some point along the line, the working class found out what they really want to do with this base, and they start to fight them. And they escape, and this one guy's on his way to another bunker when he crash lands in the wasteland and runs into this girl who's sort of a, my Mad Max, basically.
Right on. Well, and or to tie it back even more, a bit of Dune in there as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Like that's sort of the setting. It's in America where there's hardly any people left. It's very spare. A lot of things have just like fallen into decay, and what America was is barely remembered just through hard drives of TV and movies.
Well,
I'll come up with a better way to describe it when we get closer to releasing it.
Fair enough. Well, again, Maestros Volume 1 out in comic book stores everywhere on Halloween and on Comixology if you're more digitally inclined. Keep an eye out for some of Steve's other work, including, get We Stand on Guard and get X-Men if you want to see some like Age of Apocalypse. How early in your career was X-Men?
It was a couple years in. It was a really great job to get. Like I started on cable, and then that was like one of the big events right before I think the collapse.
Age of Apocalypse was huge.
Yeah, so in the 90s, it's probably the best-selling thing I've ever been a part of. I think sold close to 400,000 copies or something. The first, and I was one of the lower selling ones. I mean, the other ones sold even more. It was pretty funny, crazy. Nate Gray is still around in the Marvel universe, and
yeah,
causing.
You have left your mark. You have added to the tapestry irrevocably of the X-Men.
Boy. You put it like that.
Yeah. I mean, just trying to put somebody's got to redeem 90s comics somehow, right? Because, I mean, you were selling yourself short on the art. I kind of felt obliged to point out, yeah, Nate Gray still exists, man, all these decades.
So funny. I get so many. A lot of people still know me from that, and I'll go to a con and I'll get, like, where I was at a little tiny show in Vancouver here, and these people came, they had, like, all the comics, and still in this family of comic collectors, and they remembered it, and people like that thing.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, it was great, man. Anyway, Steve, thanks again for coming on, and again, Maestros out everywhere on Halloween.
Great, thanks, Sam.